Hello, intrepid students and YouTubers. I decided to make a fourth video here. We're going to programmatically handle the submitting of our form and dynamically updating the page without having to rely on a simple refresh redirect strategy from our server. We're going to keep it more RESTful, making sure that our server doesn't actually control what the view is, meaning our server's whole purpose is to simply receive requests and send JSON-based responses, meaning we stick to REST principles much closer. Because remember, at the end of the last video, we showed how the server can redirect a page instead of sending our level up successful message in order for our client-side code to submit the form, which would trigger a redirect and refresh back to the home page to consider updating our character data on the page, right? So that was the whole purpose here. So what we're going to do now is we need to find a way to programmatically submit this form, aka from JavaScript. Because remember, at the end of the video, we also simply had the form make a call to the action and method attributes in order for it to submit its data to our server. We depended on default HTML behavior. It's also why we wound up with the request body coming from our body parser of express URL-encoded, and I realized we used hopscotch in that video too. This is, like, as you can tell, like a week later compared to when I originally recorded the video. So I was trying to make sure I had everything put back into place. Is it going to remember where I was? It does. Look at that. How convenient. So it remembers my two tabs that I didn't save of post level up and get character, right? So there's no redirect we can have happen here, so we need to figure out how to change this. So that's what the purpose of the video is to take what we've done and write it a bit more sleek and modern and not depend on default HTML behavior. So we need to control how our form submits. And so basically we have to select our form. I can give it an ID. I can give ourselves a submit button. We can select this thing and ID it, whatever we need, and prevent the default behavior. Whatever we got to do, let's take that approach, but we should do like a form on submit, but let's keep it simple with a button click. So I'm going to give this button a name. We'll call it the hashtag, or rather ID submit button, like that. That's going to be our new button name we're going to be adding to this project here. Oh, and I should mention, this video is a continuation of the series I've been working on. Check the description down below for a playlist. If you're watching this and you're like, where did this come from? Where is this going? Where did I come from? Cotton Eye Joe. This is part 4 of a series that has 3 previous parts. They're fairly long, but they're meant for newbies to get introduced to server-side development and how it can tie the bridge together into client-side development. So make sure you go watch the previous 3 videos if you have interest in figuring out what we're even doing here. I think it's a great little series, and again, I was inspired enough to come up and pick up one little video extra on this one here to add a new feature to it. I've been talking about features all day, so I figured let's go add a new feature here. So check the description down below for a link to this playlist, the 3 previous videos, the companion repository where you can jump around the end of video branches and taking a look at where I am in this project, as well as being able to copy and paste the code on over if you want so you can see how it works. I do advise that you, even if you don't know what's going on, rather than straight copying and pasting it, write it down so you can begin practicing the muscle memory and forming those neurons in your brain. Those neural gaps are going to be forming when you write this code, even if you don't understand what's going on, by writing it by hand instead of just copying and pasting huge swaths of it on over. And as always, the YouTube stuff, make sure y'all check the description down below for a link to our community membership. For $25 a month, you get access to our front end and back end courses. Combine them, that's our full stack program. I have a standalone React course that takes you from zero to hero that I've written and keep up to date. And I'm currently working on 2 other courses in the background while I do YouTube content here as well. So if any course material updates or new courses that get added are added directly into your community membership for free, no extra charge. You also get access to our Discord where you can ask me questions about these playlists, these videos, custom content I can make for you, or anything else that you need help with on your coding journey. So consider signing up and getting involved. Check for a link in the description down below. Otherwise, like I was saying, let's let this button and actually submit this stuff to the page. So I'm going to, in my form, also go ahead and remove the default attributes that help me submit the form, which were back up here on action and method. I'm going to nuke those and format the document to get rid of those 2 pieces of information. I'm also now going to go up yonder. I'm going to class my update character data function right there for now, and simply, I don't have jQuery. Luke, what are you doing? We're going to grab that submit button. I'm going to call the variable submit button. We're going to do document.select, or query selector. Submit button was the name of the ID I had added to it, the same name of the variable I chose to use here. On the submit button, I'm going to add a new event listener that will be of type click. It's going to run a function that is going to capture the event that happens on the button click, and we're going to run e.preventDefault because I now want to stop the default behavior of the form from submitting to my server and refreshing the page after the redirect. I want it to not do that, so I'm going to write the function event or e.preventDefault, which means I can now log something and it should not get redirected, refreshed, etc. Now, of course, it also means that my character is not going to level up in any way, which we're going to have to change that. Let's go to our data. Let's go remove like our last couple levels so I can test this a little bit later down the line. Let's go back to level 9. Let's say we're back at level 9 here. So I'm going to remove that from my character JSON. I'm going to write the submit button, console log event prevent default test right here. Going to go back to the browser, hard refresh, and yeah, we're back to our level 9. We have the form right here. We can select something, click level up, and I get this console log test appearing right here. And nothing got added to my server. If I refresh the page, nothing got added to my server. So now we prevented the default behavior of the form trying to submit itself. But without the action and method attributes on the form itself, event prevent default would still trigger a page refresh. Let me show you what I mean. Earlier, we saw the console log test appear, but now I'm going to comment out event prevent default, and I'm going to show you what happens. So this time, let's go select a class, click level up. The console log appeared, and the page quickly refreshed because it submitted the form, but because it doesn't have a path or a method of how to get there, it submits to nowhere and it fails to do anything, right? Our server is not picking up the submit, as we can see. Yeah. Our server is not picking up the submit. It's not getting added to our character JSON data anymore. Nothing's happening. The page simply refreshes because it submits the form, but without directives of where and how to do it, aka action and method, it doesn't do anything. That's what happens without event prevent default. So that's why we want the form to stop doing that, submitting on the page as default behavior, and allow us to, what I said, programmatically control it instead. So what do we have to do? We need to, if you recall, make this post tab. So we're going to be making a fetch post request to this API endpoint with a specific kind of body. But we're going to change up the kind of body that we are going to do. Remember, I talked about XWWW, form URL-encoded, being the default body content type of a default HTML form submit. But since we're dealing with a REST API, or rather what we're trying to build into a REST API, let's be consistent and switch to a content type that is a JSON body. That way we can control it all via JSON and expect JSON responses back from the server, keeping it as RESTful as possible. Remember, REST is a set of guideline principles and design and architecture principles that we can choose to follow or not follow. So let's be a little bit closer and make the choice to do so. And again, we're going to control this all from code now. So I'm going to swap up my hopscotch.io. Again, if you're picking this up with me, a week later as well, then pause the video, get all your development stuff back in play here. I think that would go without saying. But instead of form URL-encoded, let's do application JSON. Now, it's interesting that it copied over what I had from the previous URL-encoded tab over to this one, but it didn't do it in the raw request body correctly. So remember, JSON needs to be an object. I'm going to have these values of selected class ranger be here. I'm going to add a set of curly braces for my JSON object, or it could be an array. It needs to be a valid data structure. I'm going to paste back in what I had, selected class ranger. I'm going to highlight selected class and wrap it, or not highlight, but just wrap selected class. The property or key of our object in JSON structure must be double quotes. We learned about this back in our own character JSON file. Property's got to be in double quotes. Same thing with strings. So I'm going to take ranger and add it into strings. This, however, is not enough to post to our server. We're going to get a problem here. I don't know what the error specifically is going to be off the top of my head, but it's going to have some issues. We're going to be trying to add a non-selected class. So we hopefully should get level up failed because we get an invalid input. And we'll talk about why here in a moment. So we're going to click send. Okay, that's good. Bad request. Okay. Hey, look at that. Code I wrote a week and a half ago is actually still working the way I expected it to. I had a good edge case here. That if for some reason someone sends us a class that's not correctly selected, then we have an error handler for that. I'm so good. Pass Luke, you are an awesome, awesome man. Okay, so we have our error here, and why? Because This request body.selected class you would think would be easy enough to be parsed and interpreted by our rec.body.selected class code. Remember from our previous video, I think video 2, we talked about interpreters. We have switched the kind of content we're sending our server with this request, and we've only hired one interpreter. And the only interpreter we hired was our Express URL-encoded middleware. So we had to hire a new interpreter that is prepared to handle JSON body requests. And thankfully, this one is also built into the body parser library that's built into Express. We're going to write app.use express.json function call, and that is simple enough to get it running. This is a new interpreter we're hiring in our chain of middlewares to say, hey, if there's a content type of application JSON coming in, then kick on your interpretive features and add me a request body that recognizes JSON parse types. So we did that one change, and the same rules apply that I showed y'all in video 2, where we can, as long as our body parser is written before our code that needs it runs, we're good to go. So we could add it here as a middleware. We could add it here as a middleware. We could add it here, anywhere in this chain, as long as it's below this call of app to the Express to return ourselves a fully configured HTTP web app, all the way right above our action, our endpoint code right here. As long as that body parser is placed there, the same rules apply. It will work at that point. But with that one change, we've added one line of code, app.use express.json. Let's see if it changes up anything. I do have node mod enabled. I do. Good. So over here, we're going to click level up again instead of an error. Level limit reached. That's interesting. Oh, ha. Well, look at that. I know what I did. So I'm not going to edit this out because I think it's a worthwhile error to think about in debug. Like, the more you code, the faster you get at looking at what happened, and your brain begins parsing like almost like a decision tree of what could have gone wrong. I know what went wrong. But again, if you're newer to coding, your brain might not pick it up as fast. So I'm going to leave this in here as like a little, because I hate editing, so I don't want to edit. But second of all, I'm going to leave this in here as a learning opportunity. So what happened? Remember, I went and removed some classes from my class list in the JSON file, but I still got this bug that says level up, level limit reached. And I was like, that's not possible because I removed a couple levels back down to level 9. But what did I not do? Why did this kick on? Because I did not adjust the other property in my character sheet saying what my current levels are. So back in my character JSON, I said my array of chosen classes stops at level 9, but remember I had this total levels property right here that I forgot to alter. So I'm going to save this at level 9. That way this one should update to level 10 when it happens. Does that work? Let's go find out. Yeah, I got a status code 2. Oh, it redirected. Okay, yeah. So I was like, why did it send the home page? And man, this is like debug city, y'all. So it sent the home page because remember, my response is to redirect back to the home route. So first off, did it add it? It did. Level 10 Ranger got added and total levels 10 is now correct. So the JSON character sheet is written correctly and good to go. Remember, our server response is to redirect back to the home page. So let's toggle those back over. Let's switch back to our res JSON level up successful response. So it stands for more RESTful principles and doesn't simply redirect back to the home page. Let's level up again in Ranger. And there we go. There's what I expected to see, which is our message level up successful. And we can confirm in our character sheet, character JSON, that level 11 Ranger got added and our total levels is still 11 correct. So all our logic is now back in place. Okay. Now that I have this data good to go, what can we do? So I now have swapped my post request to the same API endpoint, to the same method, to now look for JSON bodies. I converted my server to not redirect and send a JSON simple object message response structure. Again, you can choose to send whatever you want. You could have left it as a redirect for all that I care. But again, we're trying to be more RESTful, and we're going to write our fetch post request programmatically, not depending on default behavior. And we now know the structure that we're going to have to look for when submitting our form. Because before, we utilized the name attribute on our select option dropdown to inform our server what the rec.body property was going to be. But now we have to write it by hand inside of code. Let's go do that. So this is what the request I'm going to have to mimic or recreate in code, in JavaScript code, is going to have to be. So now that I have adjusted all the server code, I've tested it, and I think I'm done, we are now going to head back to the client-side code and actually begin coding out beyond our submit button console logging test and making sure test doesn't disappear. What I need to do now is read the input's value and be able to console log it successfully, as this will be very important, obviously, for this whole process. So let's add look at that. We have an ID right here called selected class that I can go ahead and query select. And I only want to do so inside of my button click. I don't want to get the value of the input before I run some code to submit it. I want to get it after they've done selecting something. So we can run the selector up here. I can say selected class. Technically, it's a select item, so select equals documents.querySelector ID selected class. There we go. That was the ID of the select element that we're looking for here, because that we're no longer going to be depending on the name attribute to help us. Although we could have selected it by that attribute if you wanted to, but we have access to the HTML. Let's make our lives easy. Just go add an ID to use that instead. So now that I have the input or the select option dropdown, we can call it select class dropdown. How about that? Dropdown. That way it's a more meaningful name to us. There we go. There is our select class dropdown. And I'm going to now, instead of console logging test, console log the selection and specifically the property called .value on it. Because remember, I can run my selector just fine beforehand, but I don't want to know its value until I actually click the button to submit the form. So instead of console logging test, let's go see what we console log now. There's our level 11 Ranger. Let's go ahead and add one more level of Ranger to get our subclasses. Ranger, level up. Okay, check it out. It console logged the selection. If I change the selection to Druid, it now console logs Druid, and it's not refreshing the page anymore. So there we go. We have the value of the input, and we are now ready to structure it like our hopscotch test, which is an object of property, selected class, and the value of what they selected. We hard-coded Ranger as the option here, so let's see if we can take this console log and change its structure to look like our hopscotch test right here. Let's do that. Very simple. Instead of just console logging this value, I'm going to wrap it in a set of curly braces. And then the key or property was selected class colon and that value right there. And check it out. That's all we got to do. Back over here, refresh. Let's do Ranger, level up. And that is the JavaScript structure of what we're looking for, but it's not quite JSON yet. So all we'd have to do to create this or convert it into a JSON string is to simply take the object we're currently console logging and simply place it inside of a capital letters JSON.stringify is a function we're going to invoke and pass the data we wish to stringify. And guess what? That right there is all we need to do. And that logs the exact format that we need from our hopscotch post test. We have an object, double quote selected class, double quote selected, and the actual class they select from the dropdown. We're going to make sure that's not a fluke. And it's not. So there you go. It has the correct structure, and now we are ready to send it to our server packaged as JSON data as our request body. So if you recall from the first, or I think the second video also, we fetched the character data, console logged it, and eventually passed it into this update character data function that, well, updated the data on the screen, right? That's all it did. Now we needed to make this request here to not just make a GET request. Remember, it defaults to a GET request when written this way. This is a browser built-in function called fetch that everyone utilizes these days. I'm mostly a fan of it. What we need to do now is write a version that posts to our server endpoint of /levelup method post, and it needs to pass up a JSON body and also tell our server, hey, server, I'm sending you some JSON data so our Express.json interpreter can kick on and parse that request body. So I'm going to leave that console log here for now, but here we go. we're going to write fetch. The name of the endpoint was, I'm pretty sure, level up. Let's go double confirm in Hopscotch. It's indeed /level up. Remember, the server and the website are both on localhost 3000, so I do not need to write that here in my fetch requests because I'm going to depend on the root URL by putting a / here, and it will auto add the root URL at the beginning. It should add the relative URL right there. So there we go. There's our level up. Now, fetch, the options are a little bit complicated in that it's very unopinionated. So when you begin going beyond GET requests, it gets fairly complex when you're having to figure out how to add options. And if you don't know the terms, they can be kind of hard to find when you're a newbie. So there's our options object that's going to customize what kind of fetch request this is and if it's sending anything along with it in headers or as the body, because you can add whatever you want to these requests. So the first property, I'm going to new line this readability. The first property we're going to care about is called method. And if you get this VS Code IntelliSense auto kick on helping you complete these properties, good on you. It makes life so much easier. The first property we're adding is method. Remember, it defaults to GET requests, but in this case, our method is the post request. So already we can see that our method and our quote unquote action or our endpoint right here is what our form was handling for us. The name attribute of the form is what handled this portion for us, and the default submit behavior is what handled the URL-encoded formatting for us. But again, fetch is unopinionated, and we have to write all this by hand, so let's go ahead and do so. Now, fetch, by default, will not say, hey, I'm sending JSON data unless we tell it to. So here's how that's written, and it can get a little crazy on your first go-around. In order to add some metadata saying, hey, this fetch request will be carrying a JSON body. How do we tell our server, hey, this fetch request has JSON with it so you can kick on that Express.json interpreter? That is a property here called headers. It is another sub-object of the original options object. So there's our options object of method and headers is yet another sub-object. Inside of this sub-object, we need to provide the key and value that we see right here. Come on, Luke. Dead air, Luke. Dead air while this application loads on my side monitor somewhere. Oh, where did the application load? I tried to get the pen so I could draw an arrow, but alas, I don't see where it loaded, unfortunately. Where'd you go? There it is. All right. Right here. This is what we're recreating in our request headers. Content type, application JSON. I wonder if it'll actually have that written out for us somewhere in the headers object here. Yeah, so check it out. It has content type, application JSON. So application /JSON is the syntax for telling our server this has a JSON body. The way it knows what kind of body we're sending is from a property called content-type. Syntax is very important. I don't know if it's case sensitive. We're going to find out. Content-type, application JSON. Now you have to have content type inside of a string for this object's property or key because the hyphen in JavaScript is a subtraction sign. So this is interpreted as take the variable content and subtract the value from the variable type. We know that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to do an arithmetic operation. We're doing a string. We're doing a key on an object. So you can have some non-traditional named keys on object if you just wrap them inside of a set of string quotes like that. So I always capitalize C and T for content type out of habit, and I've never actually examined to know if that's case sensitive. It doesn't appear to be case sensitive considering it's lowercase here, and I'm going to be highly surprised if this fails. I'll laugh if this fails because the C and T aren't capitalized. But we're going to learn here together, y'all. That's why I like being a teacher and making YouTube content, because I can learn just as much from you all as you can learn from me. So, outside of the sub-object we have now declared called headers, we're going to add another property called body. Hey, finally, request.body. That makes sense. Something finally makes sense. This tells our server we have JSON data incoming, and this is the actual JSON data that's incoming, aka what we have console log. So I'm going to go remove the guts of the console log and paste it for my body property, and guess what? That is a successfully, hopefully with the CNT of content type, formatted fetch post request that can add and send JSON data to our server. Just like we learned up here on our fetch request. We then get a response from the server, whether it's good or bad, error, what have you, right? And then we have to do something with that JSON response and probably log an error in case something goes wrong. Let's go ahead and do that last part since that's easy. Now we should consider doing some kind of alert or modal or toast saying something went wrong and logging it for ourselves so we see something went wrong. But for now, just console logging it for yourself is easy and fun to debug with. In between that, we're going to say .then response res.json. No matter what the response is, whether it's good or bad, we're going to roll with it. Then we're going to take that message from the server, whatever that data from the server is, and let's just console log that data. And if we see our console log appear with whatever our server response is, which if we go back to Hopscotch, we know is an object of property message, value, level up, successful, or an error with the message and error inside of it. If it logs this data that says level up successful, that means the fetch post request has worked. Let's go take a look at it here. Refresh the page to get the latest JavaScript code. Let's add that last level of Ranger again. Hey, level up successful. But we still haven't written any code that tells the table how to update with this new data. Now we have a couple of choices. First off, let's make sure it actually worked and is not just lying to us. It did work, indeed. We got level 12 Ranger added at the bottom down there, which means if I try and add one more class, we got a bad request error and it says level up failed, error, level limit reached. That's how you can have some red text saying level limit reached. For example, like an alert appear above this or in between these for your users to have some good UX to go, oh, I hit my level up max, so I need to have now like X's that can maybe remove these one by one. Why did I say that out loud? Because now I'm going to want to go do it and code it. All right, that might be another video. But we got a quick test and it confirms that we can't go above our level limit. So for more demo purposes, I'm going to go back and nuke my levels of Ranger yet again. This time, I'm not going to forget to go change my total levels back. There we go. Refresh the page, be back in sync. And all right, so like we saw, this will tell me I've added a new level of something, right? But it doesn't have any JavaScript logic to, say, refresh the page or to add to the table what they selected, or to retrieve the data back from the server to keep things in sync. So that's a couple choices that we now have. What I mean by that is the following. Once we submit the button and it makes that post request to our server, once it makes that post request, if we get a response back that says, hey, that request is checkmarked, they leveled up, no problem, we could look at this level, add one to it, look at what they chose as their input, and simply add it down here as a new element in the DOM. That runs the risk of potentially falling out of sync with our server if something goes wrong. We don't account for an edge case. This is collaborative online or something like that. But this is nevertheless an approach that we could take. A success response from the server tells the DOM, make a new table row with a table data cell that is the last table data cell plus one, and the current value of the selected option of the dropdown as the class name of Ranger written here. We can simply update the DOM based on what the form is and what the DOM currently is. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that without some checks, some input sanitization or things like that, that we might fall out of the sync with the server. Or if I go back into the server and done what I've currently done by modifying that character JSON, then the DOM is completely out of sync with it anyway, and we're going to have issues if we select a new level up. So we can choose that approach, and in some cases, that's a fine way and a preferred way to do it. Just update the DOM based on what's in the form after the server tells us we're good to go. But we could also choose to make another request back to the server to update the DOM and keep things in sync. That is an option that we can choose to do. And yeah, you're incurring another request to your server, but if you have data that is updating regularly and you need to stay in sync with the server and you can't depend on the DOM updating itself on status codes, then this is the other approach you could take. So I guess I should draw that out, right? So instead of depending on the DOM to inform the changes, we, again, post to the server. I'll write AP for post to the server. The server updates the character JSON with the post logic, and it sends back a response saying, okay, all done. Then we can have our code say, if we get the all done, it makes another request, this time another GET request to the server. The server collects the character JSON data and then sends that back as a response, and then we tell our table to update to the latest character table data. So instead of depending on the DOM for what changes to make, we're going to have our server be the arbiter of all changes to make. So we keep things in sync. Again, that just means we have to write a bit more code. It means that we stay in sync with the server, and it means that we're going to be making another request after our post request finishes. So now we're beginning to daisy chain requests together, and you might be wondering, that might be a lot of requests if a lot of people are using this app. Yeah, and that's a pro and con of this approach, right? They all have pros and cons and trade-offs to decisions we make. So here's how we're going to run that, and there's going to be some other issues we're going to have to deal with. I'm going to choose to leave my console log in here, so I know that the level up was successful for development purposes, for example. But now what I want it to do is to retrieve the latest character sheet data and update the table as it always has. And you might be wondering, don't we already have that code up here? Yeah, we do. I'm going to copy this fetch character request, come down here below console log data. I'm going to return fetch this character. That way with the return keyword, I can come chain on my .then on the outside, get the response, parse the JSON response like we've been doing. Then we should have our data from the character sheet, the latest up-to-date character data. And then all I need it to do is run this update character data again right here. That's all I need it to do. So let's go write this manually this time. So I'm going to go write data, update character, and pass in the data parameter, which means it should update with all my latest character data the same way it does when the page first loads. So remember, make a post request to level up a character, picking out from the dropdown what they selected. Parse the server response, log the server response upon level up. Then, after all that completes, remember, we're inside the function code block in a .then promise chain, which means it'll only get down here to console log the data and make the next fetch request if it has successfully resolved every promise up to this point. Then it says, hey, make another promise that will then parse that streaming response that will then get that data and tell the DOM to update with the latest character data from the server, keeping everything in sync. It's going to be a little bug that we're going to have to debug together here, though, I know. So, okay. Hard refresh. What are we at? We're on level 9. We're picking Ranger. Let's go Ranger. Pick Ranger. Level up. Yeah, there it is. So, hey, there's level up successful. I saw my bar here jump, which means that we're looking at... Oh, well, that's interesting. There's level 10 Ranger. That's what we expected to see. But why is it adding levels 1 through 9 after 9? Because it was 1 through 9, then add another 1 through 9, then add 10? No. So the original 1 through 9, remember, this portion was already in the DOM. And then my update character got the latest data and said, hey, add a new table row and table data cells for the newly requested data represented by this pink line now. So they are now, technically, it's in sync. We just have the previous data in the table already. So again, I could say, check what values are already in the DOM and filter them out from the array or whatever, or I can take the easy way out and just say destroy all the previous DOM elements to get rid of them, and that way it will just use the newest in-sync data from the server, and that's what I want it to do. Yeah, that's going to be the approach we take in this case. We're simply going to ask it inside of either here, or we can even have our update character data function do it, where we can have it ask it to clear out all the rows from the table row or something like that. So we have a couple different approaches we can take. Okay, and that's actually fairly straightforward. All we should have to do is take the table body we selected and simply ask it to clear its data out. So we're going to say, hey, take all the rows you currently have, aka your inner HTML, because remember, we loop through the data we pass in as a parameter. We create a row for each object, aka level and selected class, and we create a bunch of content that goes inside of each row, and we append each row to the body. So if we simply ask the table body to empty out all of its current inner HTML, it should clear all the data to prepare for a new loop, aka coming down here, this update character data should also work in this situation now. So we can update the character data and clear out the table as it currently stands, so we don't have to refresh the page to see the newest data, and we don't get our data double concatenating like this. So remember, we had this double concatenation happening here because this was the previously populated data. This is the newly gotten and refreshed quote-unquote data. So we're now going to do a hard refresh. The table goes back to the 1 through 10 original because it was all just an artifact of working in the DOM. We should add one more level of Ranger. Level up successful, and we scroll down and look at that. The data is now cleared out and then repopulated with the fresh array from our server, keeping everything in sync and good to go. And guess what, y'all? We have successfully and programmatically updated the post from the form, and we have the page adding to the data here, and we made a choice to refetch the data to keep things in sync. There are circumstances where simply updating the DOM based on the form values is the other way to go. So there you all go. There is this additional video I wanted to add to this little mini-series of how we can handle it all from a programming perspective and leave the HTML just to be the structure of the page and not mix and match. Even though that's real world, welcome to development. It's all production level code is garbage. That's just like band-aids and fires that we are putting out constantly. But at least now we have some better coding practices. We have the HTML merely be the structure and the styling via Bootstrap of the application itself. There is no default behavior of submitting things, etc. All that is handled in our case now from code. So getting and populating the data from code. Getting and reading the form also from, and submitting the form also from code. Prevent the default behavior because we're going to handle this all ourselves. We're going to programmatically say, hey, make a fetch request to the level up endpoint on this current location of localhost 3000. It's a method of post. It's going to have some application JSON with it. Also, now I know that content and type don't have to be capitalized. Body, JSON stringify. We're going to stringify the test that we had working in Postman, or Hopscotch rather. Remember, we needed the proper body parser on our server ready to go for this, which was app.use express.json function call, easy peasy. Then get the response from the server, get the data, then parse that response as it comes in, get the data, log that response, which is level up successful, make a new request for the most up-to-date character sheet. This is, again, where I would choose to do it this way instead of simply updating the DOM directly with a new table row. Then parse that response, update character. We told update character to not only generate all the rows in a loop of our data and our level progression, but before it does that, simply clear out all the current table rows from the body to prepare for our new set of data that we are looping through and appending to the DOM every single time we select something from the form. So now if I go back to my server and delete everything except for first level in my JSON file, we can now save the file. Level 1, let's go. Refresh the page. There's a level 1 class, and start adding classes in real time. And check it out. We can now quickly and accurately build out our levels on the page here and have it update in real time. This almost feels like it's like a React project now, everything updating in real time with no refreshes. But that's how you could do it from a coding perspective. So there y'all go. Hope y'all like this little series. Again, if you have any follow-up questions or things you want to see or for me to code or features to add to it, I had this weird dream that we built this into this. I had this like weird, not fever dream, but like, I think it was over the weekend recently. I had a dream about this application that we took it and started adding subclass logic. So we know when we added one level of cleric, you get to add a subclass. If you add 2 more levels of barbarian to get, and this would have to calculate, there are 3 total levels of barbarian. They don't have to be side by side. 3 total levels of barbarian means we now get to pick a subclass for barbarian, and that would have to populate something. So in my dreams, we did all of this, and I feel like it'd be a nightmare to do, but nevertheless a fun nightmare to do that we could probably learn a lot along the way. But I don't know if there'd be interest in that, and I know people will probably watch it anyway, but if there is interest to continue on in some form or fashion or restyle it, I don't know if is it mobile responsive? Yeah, it's mostly mobile responsive. It's not bad. But if there are further things for me to code out, just let me know. Or even deployment. I can go into deployment as well and talk about how we can get this sucker out there and working, no problem. So yeah. Do the YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Check out our description down below for a link to this companion repository and its branches. Use Hopscotch, use Postman, use whatever you want to test your API endpoints. And yeah, check out a link for our community membership if you are interested in going through our front end, back end, or my React course, as well as anything else we put out. And trust me, it doesn't sound like 3 courses don't sound like a lot, but that full stack program takes our full stack students months to complete and our part-timers half a year or more to complete. So there's tons of content in there, even though it's only 3 courses. Don't be fooled by a small number. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video, whatever it might be.